The rain came down over the city like bad news typed on carbon paper. May 23, 2026. A Saturday night with wet pavement, tired neon, and too many open ports staring out from cheap routers and forgotten appliances. In my line of work, the city never sleeps. It just listens on another socket. Tonight's files were heavy. 2 armed robberies with command injection written all over them. 2 break-ins hiding in the back hall, one with directory traversal, one with remote command execution, wearing a medium label but carrying a sharp knife. No repeat offenders caught in the act tonight, no KEV entries. But every case had a public trail, and my informant's tip, the EPSS probability, sat at 1% for each one. Low odds on paper. Still, I have seen low odds kick in a door before breakfast. First on the slab was CVE-2026-7548, an armed robbery with a CVSS score of 828 and an EPSS probability of 1%. The scene was a Totalink NR1T0-08T0X router, firmware version 920.120U2029.20.110. The broken part was command injection, likely under CVE-78, improper neutralization of special elements used in an OS command. The vulnerable function was sub41A68C in cgbin-shiksteki.cg.chi.cdp request to the CGI endpoint and manipulates the setus. That value is taken by the router's web component and passed into a shell command without proper validation or safe argument handling. If the attacker places shell metacharacters in setusd, the router does not treat them like poison. It treats them like instructions. The shell runs attacker-supplied commands. The scope is tight but ugly. The known affected version is Totalink NR11000ites, firmware 920U10000ites, firmware 920U279B2019. Totalink gear is common in small office, home office, and consumer networks, often sitting at the edge where the rain hits first. An attacker who reaches the management interface may gain command execution on the device. From there, the playbook is old and mean. Drop a botnet payload, change DNS settings, open a tunnel, pivot into the local network, use the router as a listening post for credential theft. The report says remote attack is possible, and the exploit is possible, and the exploit is possible, and the exploit is public. Authentication requirements are not clear from the bulletin, so defenders should assume exposed administrative CGI access is dangerous until proven otherwise. The remedy is simple in shape, even if vendor patch detail is thin. Sysadmins, network teams, and security teams should check every Totalink NR118-on-X for firmware 920U162799920U2021920LSIM and upgrade to the latest firmware available from Totalink that supersedes that build. If no patched build is available, remove the device from direct internet exposure, disable remote administration, restrict access to the web interface by trusted internal IP only, and place it behind a firewall or VPN. A WAF rule can block suspicious setusd values containing semicolons, pipes, backticks, $parenthesis command substitution, or new line characters, but that is a raincoat, not a roof. For detection, look in web access logs for post or GET traffic to hcgbin-cstegi.cg.cg with setusd in the parameter list, especially if it contains shell characters or commands like wgwet, curl, busybox, sheechmod, tftp, or nc. Watch outbound connections from the router to unfamiliar hosts. A quiet router that suddenly starts talking like a stool pigeon is telling you something. But that wasn't the only body on the slab tonight. The next case was CVE-2018-25312, a break-in with a CVSS score of 6.5 and an EPSS probability of 1%. The product was life-size ClearC 3214, a video communication platform from an older era of enterprise collaboration. The weakness was directory traversal, usually filed under CVE-22, improper limitation of a path name to a restricted directory. In the Smart Guy interface, authenticated attackers can manipulate path parameters in file download and upload functions. The chain is plain. The attacker logs in. The attacker sends a crafted request to the Smart Guy endpoint with path traversal sequences like .g or encoded variants. The application joins that attacker-controlled path with a server-side file path but fails to canonicalize it safely and fails to enforce a permitted directory. For download, the server reads a file outside the intended folder. For upload, the server writes attacker-supplied content outside the intended folder. The affected version named in the file is life-size CVE 3.1424. This is not the sort of modern cloud service that shouts from every rooftop. It is more likely to be found in older enterprise, education, healthcare, or government communication deployments that stayed alive because nobody wanted to touch the wiring. The attacker needs authentication, which lowers the street heat, but not enough to sleep easy. With read access, the intruder may steal configuration files, application data, logs, or credential material. With write access, the case gets darker. If the web server will execute uploaded files in a reachable directory, the attacker may turn a break-in into code execution. Even without that, they can overwrite configuration, plant malicious content, stage tools, or prepare lateral movement. A stolen low-privilege account could be enough to start the job. Remediation starts with reality. Life-size CVE 3.1.4 is old, and teams should move to a supported release or retire the exposed service. If the vendor provides a corrected build for the CVE line, upgrade beyond 3.1.4 to that supported patched version. If no maintained patch is available, isolate the service, remove internet exposure, require VPN access, and restrict smart guy access to trusted administrative networks. Developers maintaining similar code should normalize paths, reject traversal sequences after decoding, enforce an allow-listed base directory, and use safe file APIs that verify the final canonical path remains inside the intended route. Detection should focus on smart guy requests containing .lesse double, percent encoded traversal like pair2 e%2 ESE double encoded patterns, or unusual upload targets. Review application directories for unexpected web scripts, modified configuration files, or recently written files owned by the web service account. I barely had time to light another cigarette when the next file landed on my desk. CVE-2026-7446 came in as another armed robbery, CVSS-7 EPSS probability 1%. The accused was VetCoders mcp-server-se 1.0 in the MCP interface component with vulnerable functions in srkindex dots including analyze results, filter results, export results, compare results, scan directory, and create drool. The weakness was OS command injection, CVE-78 again. The manipulated argument was ID. The attack chain starts when a client sends a request through the MCP interface that includes a crafted ID value. The TypeScript server receives it and routes it into one of those functions. Somewhere along the line, the ID is used to build an operating system command, likely invoking symgrep, file handling, export logic, or comparison tooling. Because the value is not safely validated or passed as an isolated argument, shell metacharacters in the ID can break out of the intended command. The operating system then runs the attacker's extra command. The affected version is VetCoders mcp-server-se 1.2020. The deployment base is likely smaller than a household router fleet, but the blast radius can still be mean. MCP servers often sit near developer tooling, source code, security scan results, API tokens, CI workflows, and local repositories. If exposed to untrusted users or connected to an AI agent workflow without strict boundaries, command injection can become a supply chain doorway. An attacker may read source, steal secrets, alter scan output, create misleading rules, plant files, or execute code on a developer workstation or build host. Authentication and exposure depend on how the MCP interface is deployed, but any interface reachable by an untrusted client should be treated as a loaded revolver on the desk. The clean remediation is to upgrade mcp-server-se to a patched release later than 1.021 available from VetCoders. Until then, DevOps teams, security engineering, and developers should disable remote or shared access to the MCP server, bind it to localhost only, and run it inside a lockdown container with no sensitive mounts. Do not pass ID or any user-controlled field into a shell. Use spawn or exec file style APIs with argument arrays, not shell concatenation. Apply strict allow listing for ID values, such as UUID or simple alphanumeric tokens with length limits. Detection should look for MCP requests where ID contains semicolons, pipes, ampersands, backticks, dollar parenthesis, redirection characters, or commands like curl, wget, bash, python, shcat, env, or git. On the host, review process creation logs for unexpected child process from node, especially shells or network utilities spawned during scan, export, compare, or rule creation activity. The night was far from over. Last came CVE-2026-7691, called medium with a CVSS score of 623, but I have learned not to trust a quiet suspect. Another break-in, another command injection, another command injection, another edge device with its pockets turned out. The product was Wavlink WL-WN570HA1 V4111-54111 10222111.cgbin and HAG. The weakness maps to CVE-78OS command injection. The attacker sends a remote request to cgbin atom.cg and manipulates the command argument. The CGI handler passes that argument into setctmd, where it is used in a system-level command path without proper sanitization. The router or access point then executes attacker-controlled shell content. The exploit has been disclosed publicly, which means the method is no longer just a rumor in a back room. The affected version is Wavlink WL-WN570HA1 firmware R70HA1-570HA1 V4110ND. Wavlink range extenders and wireless gear show up in homes, branch offices, small shops, and improvised networks where documentation is usually a coffee-stained note taped under the desk. The attacker can gain command execution on the device if the vulnerable CGI endpoint is reachable and any needed access condition is met. From there, they can join botnets, redirect traffic, change network settings, observe internal traffic paths, or use the device as a bridgehead into the LAN. As with many embedded web interfaces, the difference between local and internet reachable is everything. A device exposed to the public web is bait under a street lamp. Remediation means network teams and sysadmins should identify WL-WN570HA1 units running R70HA1 V141111 and upgrade to the latest Wavlink firmware that replaces that build. Security teams can add firewall or WAF controls to deny requests to hcgbin atom.cg with a command parameter containing shell metacharacters, but the stronger move is isolation. Detection should cover web requests to hcgbin atom.cg, especially with command equal to encoded or suspicious strings. Watch for outbound traffic from the device to download sites, unknown IP addresses, or common malware staging ports. If the device supports logging, preserve it. If it does not, collect network telemetry from the gateway. Cheap hardware keeps poor notes, so the street cameras matter. 4 cases. No confirmed repeat offenders caught in the act by KEV tonight, and every informant tip sat at 1%. But public exploit detail changes the weather. Command injection on routers and developer tooling is not theory. Directory traversal on an old collaboration server is not nostalgia. These are the small cracks that let a bad actor slide into the building without tripping the front alarm. So here is the takeaway from Jack Cipher's desk. Inventory the named products. Patch total link NR1 Tino 80 I1 Tino 01 Tino 1 Tino D2CCC9 B2CC Fru O Tino 1 Tino. Retire or upgrade life-size ClearC 321 Tino. Update or isolate mcp-server-se 1.0 and patch or replace Wavlink WL-1 Tino.0HA1 R7.0HA1 V1401 0.2211.10. Lock management interfaces behind VPN and trusted networks. Hunt for traversal strings, shell metacharacters, and strange child process. The city is wet, the night is long, and keep your WABs warm, your firmware current, and never trust a command line that takes orders from a stranger.